I'm recording this video in a part of the world where marijuana is legal, and if there's any moral I want to put to this story, well, we have a saying in English: it ain't over till it's over. You ain't sober until you're sober. If you say you quit drugs, I've seen so many people claim this. I've seen Tana Mongeau say a million times that she quit drugs, she didn't do drugs, except, of course, marijuana and alcohol. Well, look at her life. It may be that all she uses is marijuana, alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine. That she may be telling the truth. From her perspective, she doesn't use drugs. But she's not sober. And a lot of us in the vegan demi-monde have seen the increasingly gruesome spectacle of the decline and self-destruction of Charles Marlowe. Charles Marlowe used to be my friend a long, long time ago. And he told me things personally that he'd never stated on YouTube or never stated up to that point. He told me things about his personal life. He told me things about his hopes and dreams. And it was directly because of the influence of my channel, because of one particular video on my channel, that he got his act together and made an application to go back to school, to go to college. He had a lot of advantages in doing that too. His father was a college professor, so he really had someone who could help him with the paperwork. He got himself back into college. He got himself an internship in radio. And I remember saying to him at the time, I said, well, if this is what you want to do, if you want to go into broadcasting, at least this is one of the fields where people might be willing to overlook the fact that you used to be a heroin addict, you used to be a cocaine addict, and so on. Because so many people in the entertainment and broadcasting world have some kind of history with hard drugs, that he might be able to get ahead. And I don't know, years later, at least a year later, he dropped out of that program. He dropped out of college. He'd got himself an apartment in Los Angeles. But briefly, because fame here on YouTube is fleeting, briefly, he had an income of about $3,000 a month. He had a talent agent. He had some people working for him. He had an income from both live streaming and YouTube. And he felt he was on top of the world. And during that time, he swore, even if he was lying, he swore that he was clean. He swore that he wasn't using drugs. And what did he mean by that? He meant that he was using nicotine, caffeine, marijuana, alcohol, and some performance-enhancing drugs. Testosterone, at one point Anavar, which is a steroid, maybe some other bodybuilding drugs too. And, it was obvious to everyone that he was high. But I don't think any of us are in a position to say that he couldn't be that high on the combination of drugs he was openly admitting he was taking. I mean, even now, right, and I'm forgetting at various times he was on different drugs, legal drugs, prescription drugs, to help him cope with the legacy of his addiction. So currently, he states that he's on Suboxone. And those drugs, he was on Suboxone, he was on Wellbutrin. You're not sober unless you're 100% sober. And it's a great evil in our society that marijuana is being normalized in this way. It's true, many of the problems with marijuana are even worse with alcohol. Depends how you make the comparison, depends on your personal set of values and priorities in life. That here is not my point. You can see there are people struggling with sobriety, including Cheetah, including Tana Mongeau, including many people you probably know in your own life. And the excuse that being high on marijuana, that using marijuana is somehow not using drugs, that it's somehow not a real drug, whether it's illegal or illegal, whether it's legal or illegal in your jurisdiction. This is an excuse that, in a subtle and pervasive way, does destroy people's lives. And there's something you can do. You may feel powerless watching this video. You may feel powerless if you go now and click on Vegan Cheetah's recent videos showing him at, I hope it's rock bottom. I don't know how much lower he can go. Showing the extent to which his life has now been destroyed once again, or whatever you want to say. You may feel hopeless and you may feel powerless. But I want to tell you something you can do. You can live sober. And you can be loud about it. You can really broadcast it. You can really talk about what it means to live clean and sober. The best comparison I can think of is the role of athletes. Those few athletes, even if they're a minority, who don't use steroids, who don't use performance-enhancing drugs, where it's really important for them to talk about what it is to live in the discipline of that sport, what they can and can't accomplish, even if they're contrasting maybe times of their life when they did use steroids and when they didn't. If the people who are clean and sober remain silent, then we find ourselves slipping further and further into a culture that celebrates being in a constant state of heedlessness, in a constant state of self-indulgence, in a constant state of drug-addled misery that people mistake for happiness. Yeah, I have nothing else to say, guys. 2,500 years ago, Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. And, people would rather feel nothing than feel unhappy. And that's why it seems they're so easily addicted to drugs that fundamentally are painkillers. Drugs that fundamentally provide nothing more positive in your life than a kind of numbness, than a kind of distraction from dealing with who you really are.